This is an analysis of William Shakespeare's 130th sonnet, My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. In order to understand the meaning of the poem, the context must first be described. When Shakespeare wrote the poem, it was during the Renaissance period and Elizabethan era, where poets professed their love to women through overzealous dramatic poetry that often resulted in unrealistic descriptions of a woman. This in turn caused Shakespeare's response to the idealized woman through his sonnet where he describes the Dark Lady, a woman consistently written about in his previous sonnets. Shakespeare wants to make a point about the problems of this style of poetry and therefore hopes to address the issues to his audience where he assumes they are aware of this style of poetry and assumes they idealize women as well as believe in cliché love poems that are consistently written throughout the Renaissance. He wants to seem realistic and insightful about women because he understands they are not something to be romanticized about and idealized to the point where the claims being made are no longer true, like poets often during the Elizabethan period. Therefore, his purpose is to criticize as well as mock poets that idealize women, as well as to point out that a woman's beauty should not be based solely on her physical appearance. Therefore, Shakespeare's sonnet is organized through four main sections. The first, he uses antithesis to describe what his mistress is not and contrast her to the ideal woman that these poets often reference. He then describes her in depth as opposed to saying what she's not, but actually starts to describe her appearance. And then, in the third section, he describes her plainness and ordinary appearance. And then, however, there's a shift after the third quatrain and where he starts to make a statement and he shows that he still loves his mistress for what she is as opposed to what she is not or idealized as or what she should be. He first starts out with an abrupt statement about his mistress, saying that she does not stand out and is not striking because the sun is a symbol of radiance and often is a symbol of beauty, and he is stating that she is not. And then he goes on to contrast her from coral. Coral being a standard object, and the coral is the color red, and red can symbolize lust and passion, but he's saying she does not have that. So she does not even amount to the color of just a regular item. And however, in the Renaissance, these ideal women were supposed to have red lips, and however, she did not have. So she does not fit that typical standard of a woman. He then goes on to say, if snow be white, white is a symbol of purity and cleanliness, and he says her breasts are dun being plain and dull. And so Shakespeare, he doesn't over-sexualize her, but he reminds his audience of her normalcy as a woman. And during the Renaissance, once again, with this ideal woman, they were expected to have curves and often have these red lips and be these symbols of perfect. However, she's not. She's just a regular person. And if hairs be wires, so wires during the Renaissance, the women oftentimes wore these gold headpieces that were made out of wires. However, he's saying that hers are black. So once again, she's not that beautiful, over romanticized woman. However, she's just regular. He's not being overly sweet. He's just stating a simple fact. It's no praise to his mistress. And with these two lines, he's describing her more in depth as opposing to the first couplet where he's just saying what she's not. However, in the second quatrain, he goes on to say, rose is damask. Damask means a pattern of red and white, and it's often beautiful and expensive. And red, once again, can represent lust and love, and white being purity and striking beauty. And he says, but no such, emphasis on but no such, and I see in her cheeks. Again, with the ideal woman, they were supposed to have pink cheeks, and she's lacking yet another trait. So once again, this mocking, blunt tone. He says he sees but no, and then he says perfumes. So perfumes women were often heavily perfumed, and they were delightful to be around and often sought after by men. However, he says that the breath of his mistress reeks. So it's a strong word, it's shocking, and it's vile, gross, and unappealing. And this, once again, draws the audience's attention to just the plainness of his mistress. Finally, in the fourth quatrain, he says he loves to hear her speak. So this is starting to show his acceptance of a woman, but not quite yet, because he uses the word yet. Here he starts to give insight to his appreciation, and he's not as blunt anymore, but continues to state how, once again, she does not fit this exact bill. So he says music. So music is often melodious, and it's attractive, and it's pleasing to him, and it's far more. So music has this beautiful sound that he can enjoy and listen to. And so he doesn't, her voice is ordinary, it's nothing special, and it's nothing harmonious. He uses alliteration in line 11, grant, goddess, go. So he's referencing poets during the Elizabethan era comparing their lovers to goddesses. However, he's saying his mistress walks. So she walks on the ground. She's not a god, she's an ordinary human. However, instead of walks, he continues to describe her walking by saying treads. So treads is not necessarily graceful, and he's the opposite. It's the opposite of idealizing. He's just reinforcing and emphasizing that his mistress is just to be considered as an ordinary woman. And finally, in the last couplet in line 13 and 14, and he says, and yet by heaven, love as rare. So he makes no false claims about his love for her, and instead is honest about it. So he's saying rare. He's saying his love is exceptional. And then finally, she, meaning a woman in general, with false compare, belied with false compare. So he's saying that his love for her is as valid as any other woman who is praised with these false exaggerations and expectations. So just because she is not as one of the standard Renaissance women and she does not fit these expectations, his love for her is still valid. And finally, the tone is loving and accepting at the end. So once again, there's a shift between lines 13 and 14. This is the capstone sheet, and this is the works cited page. So overall, in Shakespeare's 130th sonnet, which was written during the Elizabethan era, he bluntly describes his mistress and her shortcomings to mock poets that idealize women in order to point out that a woman's beauty should not be based on her physical appearance.